Forum Communications Company is proud to be a part of the Trust Project. Learn more at thetrustproject.org. Hey folks, before we get started, I just wanted to tell you, you can unlock unlimited access to political news, commentary, opinion, and a whole lot more at inforum.news/port for only 99 cents a month for your first 3 months. Hurry, get this limited time offer at inforum.news/port now. This podcast is brought to you by the North Dakota Petroleum Foundation. From heating our homes and powering our vehicles to cell phones, clothing, and medical equipment, oil and natural gas makes everyday life better. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas, advancing the possibilities. Learn more at ndpetroleumfoundation.org. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Plain Talk. Happy Friday to you. The Friday before the big heat wave hits here in North Dakota, I guess. It's weather news is funny to me because it's like every year we get all exercise that it's cold in the winter, it's hot in the summer. We're setting records. It hasn't been this hot since. It's like baseball fans, right? It's always somebody does something on the field. It's like, well, that's the first time that happened since Sloppy Joe Williams did it in 1904, right? Exactly. Okay, I don't know what I'm doing with this information. It's hot out. That's all I need to know. Anyway, Senator Kevin Cramer joins me today. Kevin, how you doing?
I'm well, thank you, Rob. As you can probably see, I'm at home. So I think this is the first time I've done this show, at least on video from home. So far it's working.
So far so good. So we have a lot of things going on in the world, obviously. I want to hit the gun control debate. Obviously that's renewed again for awful reasons. I want to hit some of the January 6th stuff that's going on. But before we get to any of that, I want to talk about gas prices. Because man, that's what everybody's feeling right now. The price of everything's going up. Grocery bills going up. Everybody's feeling it. It hurts. I'm a little frustrated with the way the Biden administration. Now, I take a very nuanced look at this. I don't want to, but there's so many variables that go into the price of gas, right? Globally traded commodity, all this other stuff. President Biden didn't choose to have Vladimir Putin invade Ukraine. So there's that. But I think I don't want to say that we're blaming Biden for gas prices. I think that's an unnuanced view of it. I think the blame goes, we have created a political situation and a regulatory situation where the oil industry can't respond to changing world events in a flexible way that could mitigate these gas prices, right? Gas prices are going to go up, they're going to go down, but our industry could be a hell of a lot more flexible than they are. And a lot of that has to do with, like, the Biden administration saying, I'm going to put the oil industry out of business. It's watching President Biden, after first begging the Saudis to produce more oil, right? That didn't pan out so well. So now finally he's gonna make. So he goes and he commands the American oil industry to make these investments and produce more oil, and the American oil industry's got to be saying, you're trying to put us out of business. You want us to invest and you're also trying to put us out of business. That's got to end.
Well, Rob, I appreciate you trying to nuance it. Let me be more blunt, because it is his fault. And while he didn't want Vladimir Putin to invade Ukraine, energy inflation was happening at a very fast pace before that. And by the way, he could see it coming. He could see it coming, and he still did it. And not only that, but as recently as the last couple of weeks, his EPA has put out more memos, more guidance, preparing for new rulemaking to make it much more difficult to build the infrastructure that the oil and gas industry would need if they could even produce more. Let's also remember, he rejected all 69 requests for a small refinery waiver. And when you have RINs, that's the market, if you will, for the renewable fuel standard, the RVOs, the volume amounts, and it's now 1,800% higher for the price of a RIN. In other words, if you as a small refiner can't produce all of the ethanol or whatever it might be, blended fuels, you have to pay for that, for that quote violation with a RIN that you can't afford. In other words, he's putting refiners out of business. Now he didn't cause the pandemic, and the pandemic did create a pretty serious problem, obviously, that led to the closure of some refineries. But there is no way that a company today could start and build a new. You couldn't even get it permitted, a new refinery in less than 10 years.
We haven't built a new one since the Carter administration.
That's right.
Not a major one.
Not a major one. And the little ones can't make it.
Right. Well, yeah, the little ones can't make it. And then I think the last time a major one was tried was in Arizona, like 2005. That failed. Nobody's going to build an oil refinery, not in this political environment. And I guess that was my larger point.
Yeah.
We're the top producer of oil in the world. You know, right. we could, I don't want to say solve this problem because, again, there's so many different factors, but we sure as hell can mitigate it. It could be a lot less pain, but that means our friends on the left are going to have to recognize that we need oil.
They won't. They're sick with this religious fervor. That I just finished a radio show where a guy from San Francisco called me who was so naive about energy. It was almost, well, it wasn't hard to believe. He lives in a bubble in San Francisco. And the reality is, just take North Dakota. So could we solve the problem or mitigate it, as you put it? North Dakota is producing about 400 to 500,000 barrels of oil per day less than we were at our peak. In other words, we know how to get to 1.5 million barrels per day. Today, we're doing about 1 million barrels per day. But there's no incentive to do that. Even high price isn't an incentive because remember, a couple of years ago, oil was a negative price. And now you have the president beating up on the more vertically integrated companies, the big companies, the Exxon Mobils of the world, right, who have refineries because they're making so much money because they have big profits. Well, the reason they have so much profit and the reason, and Elizabeth Warren beats up on them for using their profits to pay dividends. Well, the reason they have so many profits is because they've got no incentive to reinvest into the infrastructure that would produce more of the product that would then bring the price down. They are being disincentivized from bringing their own price down when they want to bring the price down. They'd rather have a more stable volume than these peaks and valleys. But those are just a couple of the things. There are at least 30 regulations, or let's talk about financial services sector, Federal Reserve nominees, comptroller of the currency nominees, SEC nominees, rules coming out of the entire financial sector, well beyond their statutory authority to do so. So, he is responsible. He may not be responsible for the war in Ukraine, but he's responsible for the.
You're right, and I'm not. I wasn't trying to exonerate him from blame. More like I want the argument to be very precise because I think the precise argument becomes undeniable. We need oil, right? I mean, it's this whole there was that famous exchange between President Biden and then President Donald Trump during the debate where, I think President Trump asked him flat out, do you want to shut down the oil industry? And he said, yeah, basically. And that's not me like glossing over his words. Go look it up. He said pretty clearly he wanted to shut it down. And now we're begging him, you need to act against your interests and put all this investment into producing this product everybody needs that we're also simultaneously telling everybody you don't need it anymore. You just solve your gas problem by driving your electric car to work. There's Americans paying a $300 grocery bill trying to figure out how they're going to buy a Tesla.
Right. And on that point right there, John Kerry, the global climate czar that works for this president, they give him the title of ambassador. They've given him a 4th floor office in the State Department. John Kerry, at this very same time the president is pleading with producers to produce more, John Kerry is begging producers, not only in the United States, but every country in the world, whatever you do, do not invest in any more infrastructure. And what he's saying is to Europe, don't invest in import terminals for liquid natural gas from the United States. And he's saying to United States companies, don't invest in export terminals or pipelines that could help our friends in Europe be less dependent on Vladimir Putin. He's literally saying that out loud while the president himself is saying produce more. He's saying, don't do it. Don't do it.
It would be a good show of faith. Like Joe Biden, you just sent this letter to the oil industry saying, produce more oil, basically. Right. Even as he condescended to them and accusatory and everything else. You want to make a show of good faith to the oil? Fire John Kerry. Fire him.
Exactly.
because he's
Exactly.
completely at odds with what we need right now. And I understand, like, none of this is to say that we shouldn't continue to explore, things that can maybe transition us away from oil. We should be looking for better ways to do everything all the time. We should never stop. That's human ingenuity. But right now we need oil. Right now, I need oil to get my kids to school, not school now. It's
Do you realize, and I've been, as you know, I've been in hundreds of these discussions lately with my Democratic friends, part of the Joe Manchin gang, bipartisan gang. I'm on the committees, the Environment and Public Works Committee that debates this all the time. Do you know that if we did nothing except replace Vladimir Putin's oil and gas in Europe with American oil and gas, we'd reduce greenhouse gas emissions significantly? It'd be much bigger reduction than getting rid of all of our gas-fired automobiles and replace them with electric.
Because in America, we develop oil and gas responsibly.
Yep, exactly right, and always improving. To your point, always improving.
So let me ask you this: I've been seeing some headlines pop up where you're in favor of a carbon tariff, so to say, or a carbon tax at the border. What is this all about? Because I hear you're getting beat up on by some conservative sources saying, you're out to lunch on that one. Explain that situation to me. Sure.
So I'm also being supported by some conservative groups.
Well, that's
on
true.
it, and the reason for that is because it's a conservative solution. First of all, I don't support a price on carbon. I would not want a price on domestically produced carbon, and we shouldn't have to. To your previous point, because we do it the right way, whether it's energy production, steel production, aluminum production, the production of things like plastics or high energy intense products, even fertilizer. But others do. And our dependency on places like Russia and China for some of these very products, they have lots of carbon intensity. And we don't worry about that because we can transfer our carbon guilt by letting them produce it worse while we,
pat
we
ourselves on the back for what
that's right, exactly right. So what I'm proposing is a carbon border adjustment mechanism that is not a price, but rather a trade tool, a geopolitical trade tool, recognizing that America and many of our European allies that we do not do a lot of trade with because they don't want our food. They're more protectionist oriented. They like non-GMO foods, and even the Trump administration could not do a trade deal with the European Union. So what I'm proposing and what I've talked to several Europeans about is let's set a standard that we all meet, and it'd be a very high standard because we already meet. And anybody that doesn't meet that standard doesn't do trade with us. That would be Russia. That would be China. That would be India, until they meet a standard that is at least close to ours, or at least coming the direction of our standard. Now, they're ultimately for the import of, let's say, let's take solar panels from China. 75% of solar panel production comes from China. It's heavily, intense. And so we want to buy a bunch of that stuff. If you don't meet our standard, then there's going to be a tariff on it. No question about it. But it'll be to the benefit of the American economy. It really is an America first energy policy and carbon climate policy that takes advantage of the geopolitical moment. And I think it strengthened our relations. This is why H.R. McMaster and I, we wrote this op-ed.
Yeah.
H.R. McMaster, of course, was a national security advisor for President Trump. Now Robert Lighthizer has come out in support of it. Of course, he was the trade representative for the President Donald Trump. He's gotten way on board with it. And so we've been shopping it around. I don't know what will come of it, but
it seems like a strategy that has utility beyond the oil industry too. Because one of our big problems with for instance, you and I think are both capitalists, right? So if somebody figures out a cheaper way to make a widget, that's generally a good thing, right?
Yep.
But the problem is places like China have figured out a cheaper way to make a widget by using slave labor or just horrible working conditions or hurting people. Yeah. And so I think this sort of a policy that says, well, listen, if we can't control how you treat your people, you're China, we're America, you're sovereign, it's terrible, you should change the way you're treated. But we're going to put a price on those goods that are being, or much like you're saying, we're going to put a price on the oil that you're developing irresponsibly. We're going to put a price on the goods that you're building irresponsibly, and that's how it is. To me, that just makes a lot of sense. Like if because I think it was a discussion you and I had. Like, we're both free trade people, and we assumed, well, we'll just trade with China, and they'll want to get better. But they clearly don't want to get better. Instead, they're using the worst things about their command economy to undercut ours, and that's got to change. And we've got to protect against that.
Perfectly said, Rob. You're exactly right. And I would add, and thank you for raising the point, I would add other values to your point, and that is labor standards, human rights standards. Those all should come with a cost.
Sure.
And you know, otherwise we're shifting our guilt. So we'll let slaves in China make, you know, things that we like cheaply, and we can buy them cheaply, and that's good for our economy because, you know, consumers then have more,
I remember Milt Friedman made, and this is really, because I remembered this anecdote years later. I watched an old PBS episode with Milt Friedman in black and white. Sure. And he made a point. He said, you know, if you make your living changing oil, you can undercut your competitors by dumping the oil in the pond out back, right? Instead of disposing of it responsibly, you could cut costs. But we can't let that happen, right? You know, so it can't be a race like capitalism. You can be a capitalist while recognizing it can't be a race to the bottom.
That's exactly right.
So anyway, I think that makes a lot of sense. Let's switch gears. Let's talk January 6th. I know you and I share very different views of this January 6th investigation. I think I don't want to say I don't want to put words in your mouth. I know that you're probably less, I don't know what the right word is. Credulous, trusting. I don't know.
I'm dismissive of it.
You're dismissive of it. I think that's
fair.
Okay. I didn't want to mischaracterize your saying. Has anything come out of it, though, that's raised your eye? Because one thing I remember, you and I have talked about, and one thing that you said that you were pretty critical of Trump during all that was his treatment of Vice President Pence.
Right. And
some of the things that have come out from this committee hearing, specific to the president, what things President Trump said about Mike Pence, things that he did in his regard, are frankly alarming in my mind. What's been your opinion of those things?
Well, first of all, I haven't watched 5 seconds of the hearings because I've got, you know, who's got time for that when there's real things going on that are important. So yes, I'm dismissive of it. Second of all, you're right. I have always been critical. That very night, I was critical of the president, as is now well documented in Jonathan Martin's book that you've read. And I know you've had Jonathan on. And it continues to be my number one criticism of it because Mike Pence did exactly the thing that the Constitution requires of him in that job. And he did it with great, I think, conviction and at risk, you know, to himself perhaps, but he still did it. And to me, that's heroic. That said, there's really nothing. We didn't need to have this January 6th commission to know that. I knew that the night of January 6th. And so the whole dog and pony show, the only thing that's sort of slightly interesting to me about it has been to read some of what's come out about Liz Cheney and these pundits who sort of declare that Liz Cheney's proving that she's got a future in politics. It's like, no, she's proving she's flushed her future in politics down the drain by this overreach and sort of this over dramatization of a bad night in American history. And so I have to be honest. This is why, by the way, the Senate didn't participate, because we knew, Mitch McConnell knew that Nancy Pelosi's goal was to have this thing and keep this issue alive up to this election. What she didn't plan on was that there were going to be 100 other things of higher priority to the people of America than a January 6th commission that's regurgitating the same old stuff.
So if the concern is that, and I agree, I mean, Nancy Pelosi's a partisan, they're going to game it. It is, and that's what disappointed me. I think January 6th was a hugely important thing. I think it deserved an independent commission. Why did Republicans say no to that?
I don't recall the independent commission issue so much as I do recall the, I don't recall that as much as the idea of having a bipartisan special, commission, congressional commission. But part of the reason is because there are literally thousands of investigations going on surrounding January 6th. And by the way, with regard to Nancy Pelosi, remember, she kicked Republicans off the commission that were
our own Kelly Armstrong.
Right? Right. She only wanted people who were already hated Donald Trump. So she picked the 2 Republicans that already hated Donald Trump, which just, to me, that just disqualified the whole thing and still does.
I do want to ask you this, though, because you just said, and I agree with you, what you said about Mike Pence. I think he was heroic on January 6th, right? Mm-hmm. He resisted at the end of the, and tell me if you agree with this or not. I perceive him at the end of the day as valuing his oath to the Constitution as being more important than his loyalty to Donald Trump. Do you agree with that?
I agree. I do agree with that.
So how can you continue, and this, I wrote a column about this. I do not understand how you can continue to support Donald Trump if you believe that what Mike Pence did was heroic, the person he was resisting was Donald Trump.
Right.
So how can you continue to say that you like Donald Trump, you support Donald Trump, you'd be fine with him being president again if it took a heroic act from Mike Pence to stop Donald Trump?
Because when Donald Trump was president, we didn't have 8.6% inflation. When Donald Trump was president, we had great standing in the world.
Yeah, maybe policy-wise he was a great president, but he didn't accept the outcome of our lawful election that you voted to certify.
And I did. I voted to certify it because I too, the Constitution, my faith, and my conscience rule above the politics of the moment. All of that said, it all worked. This is part of the problem I have with the dramatization of January 6th. Look, I've always said January 6th was not just, I don't dismiss it as just some sort of, rowdy group of tourists that went through on that particular day. But I also don't regard it as some sort of mastermind, central control out of the West Wing of the White House. And I think, frankly, one thing the commission has sort of demonstrated is that none of the Trump children, his closest advisors, none of them were in on it. They were pleading with him to do something different, or pleading with Mark Meadows to get him to do something different, like call them off right away.
So, but if you have to reach the point where your daughter, who doesn't believe she said on the record in her deposition, she doesn't believe the election was stolen. Your daughter's pleading with you to do the right thing.
Right.
If the president's at that point, is that somebody we want to be president again?
Again, we have Joe Biden as president. I'd rather have a ham sandwich, quite honestly.
Okay.
So that said, we were prosperous. We were strong. Vladimir Putin didn't invade anybody when Donald Trump was president. They can say what they want about Russia and his coziness. He was a strong leader. Maybe he was not as smooth as others. That's part of what we liked about him. His authenticity was exactly that, authentic. Donald Trump has a hard time being overly critical of people who support him. He could have responded quicker that night. But at the end of the day, just like the Civil War, which was far, 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 far worse, just like after World War II, just like after Vietnam, just like after other crises and 9/11, our democracy was resilient, and our republic is alive and well. And we're going to have another election this year that I think will have a very different result, and America can go, you know what? We're pretty darn good at this thing.
Yeah, well, I agree. I mean, and I guess that's so much of my concern is built into the process. I think here's the one thing that worries me about the argument that you're making, right? Let's say somebody goes into a store and they try to shoplift, and we catch them, right? Good for us. Process works, security cameras work, the police work, well, whatever. Something worked there, right? It still doesn't resolve the fact that somebody tried to steal.
Right.
And that's my problem. Is somebody tried to steal, and thank goodness Mike Pence had the backbone to stand up. I can't continue to support the shoplifting.
But remember, Rob, it's not just Mike Pence. There are layers of protections in our system.
Sure.
And I agree with you. It grieves me to a great degree that our institutions aren't upheld as much as they were, respected as much as they once were. But in many respects, they haven't earned it either. Our bureaucracy is out of control. We have an administrative state that's ridiculous. But even that, as we look at our Supreme Court today, evidently it looks like preparing to turn back some of the overreach of administrative agencies that have gone to extra constitutional
overreach,
authority.
frankly, of previous courts. Whatever you're
exactly right.
Like the road thing. I don't need to explain to you, but it gets
tied
up. But it gets so tied. I know you were talking about which gets less attention, but even the Roe decision. It's so tied up in how people feel about abortion, it ignores the fundamental legal question at the heart of it. Is abortion a constitutionally protected right? No, it is not. If you want it to be, there's a whole process you can go through to amend the Constitution, but that involves trying to persuade a bunch of people to join your argument. And it's easier, I guess, just to get some judges to to do it. I mean, to me, that's a principled act, right? If you want abortion to be legal, then engage the democratic process. There's lots of states where it's going to continue to be legal. There's probably lots of states where it's going to be even more legal now than before because of the political environment. And there's lots of states where it's going to be illegal. And I would rather have that. But anyway, to your point, I really struggle with the January. I am so protective. And I mean, throughout human history, these peaceful transitions of power that we have are not the normal, right? All of Europe's wars and all of the wars everywhere else, it is a special thing, right? What did Ronald Reagan called it? A miracle. And I worry, I'm so worried that and it didn't start necessarily even with Republicans. You roll back the clock to 2000. I remember Democrats going on about Diebold voting machines, and George Bush was selected, not elected. I feel like we need to be more. I wish, this is my criticism of you. I wish your instinct was to be more protective of that.
I did. I voted to certify the election, and we have this wonderful process that worked really, really well. But do I get a little bit defensive when it's always about Donald Trump? Sure, perhaps, but that's because I get so tired of look what's going on today. Today, the big news is the FBI is actually going to investigate one of these attacks on a faith-based healthcare clinic. That's big news. They've ignored the previous 100 of them because they're on the wrong side of politics. Do I get a little defensive? I do, but I also look at an administration and a president who is absolutely violating laws and constitutional authorities on almost a daily basis, and thinks nothing of it. And Donald Trump. Like I said, nobody was invading anybody when Donald Trump was president, and inflation wasn't out of control. And so he had a different style. I get it, and that weighs somewhat on my opinion of him as well as several others. But right now, we miss him a lot.
On that point, I won't agree with you on that point, but let's move on. Let's talk. I'm ready for Republicans to be focused on someone new. But let's move on. Let's talk gun control. And I think you've gotten some attention, and I saw even some local Democrats and stuff calling it whatever. You were asked. It was something along the line, and I'm forgetting the exchange. I should have printed it out and had it in front of me.
The exchange was about red flag
laws, and you said basically Republicans were more interested in the red wave in winning election, and so they're characterizing that as you're more interested in politics than the policy question of saving children's lives. Respond to some of that for me.
Yeah, so I mean, and I did, and a lot of them have reported it more accurately, obviously, because the first question is about red flags. I'm saying, no, the red flag is the problem. If we go down the red flag area, see, remember, they're trying to prevent, they want a bill that will pass. They want a bill that gets at least 10 Republicans. Okay, if that's your goal, that means you're going to try to gravitate to the lowest common denominator. And maybe you can get 10 Republicans that agree with incentivizing states to have red flag laws. Now, these same 10 Republicans will say, but we're not advocating for a federal red flag law. We're just going to provide money to encourage states to have red flag laws. That makes zero sense.
I don't like the federal government doesn't need to bribe states into doing certain types of policies. We can have those sorts of debates in our legislatures. And I'm not necessarily against the concept of a red, insofar as it's like some sort of a restraining order. Now, it needs to protect due process rights.
Right.
I am very terrified of it being abused either by an out-of-control administrative state or, listen, I used to serve divorce papers at one time for a living. I know how ugly those things could get.
Sure.
I don't want to create a situation where, my neighbor's got a Donald Trump sign up, so I'm going to make up some wild story and get him trapped. We need to protect against those things. So I'm not against the concept. But first of all, I don't think a federal law is helpful because it's gonna be a one size fits all thing that's not gonna fit all our states, and I certainly don't think we need to bribe states into doing that. But from the federal level, is there anything that could change? Do you think?
I think there are a couple things that could work, and if they get there, I think they could get a lot more than 10 Republicans. But it'll be sort of obviously a member by member thing. But one is on the mental health side, and remembering that one of the things about a red flag law would be that if you had a mental health problem, if you had a mental illness of some sort that could be construed as being potentially dangerous to you or someone else, that could be a red flag. That's not okay. But what we can do, I think, anyway, is if there's a sort of a crisis intervention model of some sort, that if you have a counselor or a psychologist or psychiatrist or even, Rob, a family member. Now remember, the Second Amendment is really important, but so is personal privacy. So these things are not easy. I'd never want to pretend these are easy discussions to have. But I think some of it's just a matter of resources for our schools, resources for our communities, more of a community health model to mental health. One of my very first town halls when I was in the House, a woman who was a mother of a child was asking me about community-based mental health care. And I'll never forget, it was in Bismarck. She was sitting on a couch at a coffee shop. And I think we can do some more things there, provide some more resources, incentives to do that. And then to the degree that information that is realized in a legitimate setting can be passed on, but then ultimately adjudicated. There has to be some sort of adjudication. Now, here's the other area here where I think you're going to maybe find some common ground. 6 of the last 9 major school shootings, and when I say they're all major, but that constitute mass shootings, that's a specific definition, have been with people between the ages of 18 and 21. Now, 18 is an adult, right? But what we don't have, and I've seen some things in this most recent Uvalde shooting that most people maybe haven't seen, but you have a 17-year-old, or let's say a 16-year-old, that has had an adjudicated disqualifying characteristic. By disqualifying, I mean something that would, if it happened when they were 18, would disqualify them from getting a gun. But on the first day, on their 18th birthday, it's as though they're 1 day old. Nothing that happened when they were 16 prevents them from getting a gun. And there's some accusation and legitimate concern that the shooter in Uvalde had some of those exactly those situations that were not part of the national.
It's not part of the public record, right? Because it was
not part, and it doesn't have to be part of the public record,
right?
But it could be part of the NICS record.
Well, I think there's a way we could do that, right? Without
there's got to be a way
and narrowly tailor it and say in this specific incident, if you're under 21 and you're looking to get a firearm, then your juvenile record is going to count against it, and the juvenile record doesn't need to be in there. All that needs to be in there is a check mark saying, no, there's something disqualifying in his juvenile record. We're not going to tell you it is, but it's there.
That's right. That's right.
The kid trying to buy the gun is going to know what it is, right?
That's right.
That's all that matters. I really agree with that. When I had Congressman Armstrong on, he was talking about the need for more school counselors, and not like the ones that help you fill out college applications, although they're important too. Right. But actual mental health people, I think in our schools. I like that a lot better than cops roaming around.
I actually introduced a bill about a month or so ago, maybe it's time's so deceiving, but a month and a half, 2 months ago maybe, and actually a bill with I forget who the Democratic co-sponsor was, maybe Jackie Rosen, but introduced a bill that provided incentives, steered some existing dollars and then some incentives toward schools and actually toward students becoming school counselors. In other words, it's a bill that would incentivize a student going into psychiatric care, psychology care, counseling to consider a career in the school system. And so it actually was Gene Shaheen, my communications director, just texted me, Gene Shaheen and I, to try and incentivize more people to go into schools, at least for some limited time, so that schools would have access to that type of workforce and talent. I think that makes perfect sense. We need more access. But Rob, if I might just also express, there's not some sort of utopia out there apart from a sovereign God who created us to be what we are and that can help us. The idea that somehow we're just going to eliminate all of our problems with more treatment when we don't deal with symptoms, or when we're dealing with symptoms rather than the word problems. This is a real problem in our society, and we've sort of looked the other way as things have just deteriorated and we've drifted. And I'm pledging to be bolder about this discussion. That's not to say, obviously, again, I introduced the legislation with Gene Shaheen, but we also have to have, a real serious discussion about family life in America.
Two things there. First of all, I like the way you put it with a crisis intervention model. I think that really makes. I think of it like if somebody gets put in jail, they lose a lot of their rights, among them voting rights. But like in North Dakota, when you're out, you get them back. So I mean, if we're gonna have, and like the red flag, maybe that term needs to go away.
That's part of the problem, right?
But let's. I mean, something that's focusing on. Okay, we're gonna intervene because there's a problem. Mm-hmm. But then part of, if you look at, somebody brought this up. I think Cam Edwards brought this up. He's a guy who used to broadcast. I don't know who he works for now, but anyway, he's a big pro-gun guy. But he made the point that in the 19 states that have red flag laws, once they take the guns, that's it. That's all they do. They take the guns, and then that person just lost their guns, and there's nothing else. A model that says, okay, listen, there's a crisis here. We got to intervene, but now here's a process through which you can, a path back to getting your rights back. Right? I really like that. Like, let's help this person, right? Something's going wrong. Let's not punish them by just taking their guns away, which, by the way, I think might make a person feel worse, might make their attitude, their feel, whatever's going on with them more extreme if they feel like they were acted upon in a way that wasn't helpful, but that was more just punishing them. Let's have it be like a holistic thing where we come and listen, there's a problem here. We're here to help. Let's get you back on your feet and get you back to being a normal citizen with all your rights.
That's exactly right. Yeah, you need to give them a path, a hopeful path.
Right.
But we add to the confusion of kids' lives today. I mean, and let's not forget. I mean, we have an entire movie and TV industry, and certainly in the electronic game industry, where killing is becoming rather normalized. And you already brought up Roe v. Wade and abortion. I mean, I don't know. We're raising generations. We've raised generations of people that, to believe that somehow
the violent video game,
not that precious.
Listen, I was that generation, right? I grew up playing Doom on the computer, and obviously the movies, and it's so available now. And I mean, violent crime went down as those things went up. But I agree with you. I think I don't want to blame video games. You and I might disagree on that. I think you made a really good point that there's something societal going on. And again, you look at what happened in Uvalde, where, I mean, this guy we know in the public record, there were some incidents. He had slashed his own face. He was threatening other students. I think he threatened some female acquaintances that he was going to rape them. He talked about shooting up the school. And one problem is, you want to talk about the societal problem, we could have all the red flags laws in the world. What good are they if nobody uses them? Right? What good are they if a member of the community or a member of his family or whatever doesn't say, listen, this person has a problem, let's help them. If that's not our society, that's a problem. I don't know there's government policy in the world that's going to fix that.
There is not, Rob. You've said it very well. And in fact, I would even point to some hopefulness. So you might remember in 2018, and I think it was the shooting down at the club in Florida.
Was it Pulse nightclub? Is that?
I think that was the one. It was one of them around that era anyway. And I was in the House at the time, and the response was fix NICS. That was the name of the bill, and we did pass it. And it gets sort of to the issue you're talking about right now, because what you were having is you had a lot of sheriff's departments, you had a lot of police departments, smaller states, smaller counties. They just didn't take the time to put names in the in the National Criminal Background Check that should have been in there. You also had, in that case, as I recall, the shooter had a record of gun crimes, but it was in the military. And not even the military.
Well, there was a shooting I think the Air Force got sued.
That was Texas. That was the
it was a Baptist church in Texas.
A church shooting. That's right. It is a tragedy in and of itself that I can't keep my shootings straight. There are so many of them, but that's the reality we're in. But so that was another one about the same time, and so we have these people that should have been in a National Instant Criminal Background Check list as per current law that is widely accepted by gun owners and gun advocates. Since we passed Fix NICS in 2018, or right after that passed, it became law, 11.5 million names were added to the NICS list, names that should have been on it previously. Now, what you can't prove is a negative. You can't prove, well, how many of those 11.5 million did we prevent from killing other people? We don't know that. And we don't want to know that. But you could probably be certain that we might have saved some lives with that. So now, what more can we do along the same lines while not taking away people's rights, but actually using a system that ought to work better? And I think there still are. I think there's something like 1 million people that they know of that in this juvenile, with juvenile records and juvenile disqualifiers. If that was passed on after their 18th birthday, some lives would have been saved. And the one in Uvalde might be one of the examples.
The one thing I do like when we talk about, even red flag, which I think you and I agree is maybe misguided in some ways. At least we're talking about it as a people problem and not a gun problem, right?
Very good point.
Because it is. I like that. That's, and obviously we have the push. We're going to ban certain types of gun, which are a lot of times rooted in a fundamental misunderstanding of gun technology. But I'm glad that we're talking about it this way, because at least this debate I feel like is productive. Like we could say this is a people problem. There are people who are choosing to commit these acts of violence. And we need to solve that. And
that's right.
That I think is a much healthier sort of debate.
And that's the low hanging fruit that I think we can get to. So in addition to protecting schools themselves, providing the resources, providing the incentives, also though providing the flexibility at the local school level to decide what to do. You don't want a cop in every school, but maybe you do. But that's the school's decision.
Yeah,
not every teacher is comfortable packing.
I'm one parent in Minot, North Dakota, but I'll tell you, I'm not always necessarily, real keen on turning our schools into fortresses or giving them that feel, right? Like I want school to be a happy place where my children go and not feel like they're trudging into an institution and there's a cop standing. And I love our men and women in law enforcement. They do a great job. Nothing against them, but they're cops. Right. And they're not guidance counselors. They're not any of those other things. They're cops, and I don't need them posted up in the schools all the time.
And by the way, there's a shortage of police officers in this country. So if you put one in every schoolhouse in America,
need them out on the streets. I think we need
right.
counselors in the schools who could say, hey, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old kid, you're having some problems. Come and talk. And here's some resources. And let me talk to your parents. And let me talk to your spiritual leader, as the case may be. Let's act as a community to help you out.
And therein lies a little bit of another problem that you raised that I think we need to look at. I've talked quite openly about this. And that is how much intervention of an adult, for example, is acceptable. As you know, again, we protect our privacy. But if you, as a parent of an adult child, recognize things and you went to that child's counselor or psychologist, if they're seeing one, and said, hey, I have some concerns about this. Am I right to be concerned? That person can't talk to you about it.
Yeah.
And, that caregiver, and so I just think we need to find some ways within our Constitution, to
open it up, not necessarily for the government, but to open it up for family, community, can solve some of these things. I think that's a fundamentally conservative. Isn't one of the things we've said is that government has supplanted so many of those things. Whether I'm not a particularly spiritual person, but you are, and I recognize how important our churches and our civic institutions that aren't necessarily how important those are to our life. And I think one of the longtime conservative arguments is this sort of paternalistic government has supplanted a lot of those things. And maybe some of this is I don't want to blame school shootings on anybody, but maybe like some of the rise or some of the roots are laying that, where we have kind of a hands on our community. We see everything through our computer screens or our phone screens, and we're not engaging with one another as fellow human beings, as community members anymore. And maybe that's got to change, because there's a lot of people who could step in and say, listen, you're on a bad path here. Let's get you some help, or try to help you, or try to intervene in some way. I think we could do a lot more of that, but maybe the government's just got to get out of the way of some of that.
No, I think you're right on point.
Well, Kevin, I think that's all the time we have for today. I certainly appreciate you coming on. You and I are never going to see eye to eye on Donald Trump. Boy.
No, we're not.
But
we don't have to.
We don't have to. I'm hoping the day will come by when maybe that debate's irrelevant and we'll have some new leaders. But I appreciate you being on, Kevin, as always. We'll talk to you again in a couple weeks.
Look forward to it. Thanks, Rob.
Want more political news like this? Visit inforum.news/port to get 3 months of unlimited access to our news network for only 99 cents a month. Don't wait. Get this limited time offer at inforum.news/port now.